Welcome back, everyone, to the Rebel Crow Psychic Show, Season 2, with your host, Adina Silver. I have an awesome, returning special guest, one of our homegirls of the podcast, the wonderful Erika Buenaflor. So stick with us, and we'll be right back. Let's get into it. We're talking to Erika Buenaflor, the curandera, the teacher, the spiritual person, one of my favorite authors of all time. We're talking to her about her latest book, Animal Medicine, a Curanderismo Guide to Shapeshifting, Journeying, and Connecting with Animal Allies. It has been a fantastic read. We're going to get into talking to her, but I just wanted to say hi first. So hi, Erika. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Athena. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I was so excited to read this book. You know, I'm like an OG fan and I've read all your work. So, but this one has really hit me in a different stride this time. This book really connected a lot of dots with me when it comes to connecting with nature. So, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm a practicing curandera, practicing well over 20 years. My principal mentors, they were from, I met them in the Yucatan. So two of them were Yucatec Mayan, and the other two identified themselves as Nahuatl. So basically what that means is that they were very proud of their indigenous culture, their indigenous background. So a lot of that got transferred onto me. And then so informally, that's a big part of my practice as a curandera. And then academically, I also studied a lot about ancient Mesoamerican indigenous traditions. So curanderismo, as you know, just so people, in case people don't know, it's a Latin American shamanic healing practice.
Absolutely. And it's primarily Mesoamerican, but you can find some of it in the Caribbean as well. So yeah, it's one of those things that kind of transcends the whole community, which is why like so many people feel called to it. I have to ask you, what inspired this book? Because this book has been a little bit different than your previous books.
Well, you know, I just felt like there wasn't any like of our mythologies, and I mean like the indigenous mythologies, and also our healing traditions, working with animals. And a big part of it is shapeshifting. You know, and there's all kinds of shapeshifting is just so big. It's not just,
Absolutely,
you know, the horror film, like physical shapeshifting. But there's a lot of healing in that. And, you know, it's just that was just like missing from all new age, all like spiritual books. And what was covered was an academic, but it's not very accessible a lot of the time.
Yes. Absolutely. So, I know exactly what you mean by that, because I've been in the community myself for a while now, and I noticed that your books take a different approach. It's not just academic. It's not just spiritual. It seems like you merge both of these worlds in such a cohesive way where it's really like broken down for even the most like lay reader can understand what you're getting across. And to your point of shape-shifting, you're correct about that, especially because in the Latin American community, we have heard a lot of like scary sorceress kind of stories about shape-shifting. So it's been really cool to see, you know, shape-shifting for healing means.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's one of the, I talk about it there were so many different stories. There were actually curanderas. There were healers that would shapeshift and they would heal people. And it's actually recorded in one of the missionaries. And this is something that, you know, it's a 17th century missionary. He's talking about this. And one of them is Ruiz. And he's talking to this, Alarcón and Ruiz. He's mentioning, it's like, yeah, there was this gentleman who was, he was a white dog. And when he came out of the room, you know, the wife started hitting the white dog. And she actually hired this gentleman to heal her husband. And he comes out, I was like, why were you hitting me? And she's like, well, I thought you were going to do something. It's like, yeah, I'm the healer. I'm the curandero who's healing, working with your husband. That's one of the ways that I heal. So, I mean, and the reason why this was like so just different is because we're talking about missionaries who were very, they didn't believe in any of this stuff.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if they wrote about that and they documented and they were like, okay, there's something, and they wrote so much about it. I mean, it wasn't just one. They're just like, all of them wrote they all had some kind of interactions with some kind of shapeshifter.
And I noticed that it's a lack of understanding, like on a cultural framework kind of way, with some of these ethnographers that have been writing from, centuries ago. Like they are unable to lift their own religious beliefs or put them to the side in order to look it through somebody else's eyes. Like you notice that there's little pieces that don't quite click there, So it's interesting to see where you kind of fill in the gap, to kind of open up the understanding of what these colonizers and ethnographers back then were really trying to get across.
Yeah, and it's still happening.
Oh yeah. Yes, that is true.
It's still happening. Like it's something we do. It's so common. It's so common, even when we meditate and we go in and we work with animals. And I don't want to get ahead of myself because I know you have a flow, we have a flow, but it's a very common thing with like etheric, with astral. It's just, so I felt that there was just big gap that needed to be filled. So that's what inspired me to write this book. It's like, okay, we don't have, it's like, what were the 70, like, I didn't think of like, okay, this many number of animals, but it just so happened. I was like, let me look through all the animals that are mentioned. And those are the animals that are going to come out in the book, whether it's in a codice, whether it's in artwork or some kind of mythology or all of them, bring them all out and basically preserve our traditions, our history in a way that it gives us, it's a spiritual history, that gives us, grounds us into our roots, that grounds us into that. Because a lot of times I grew up hearing, it's like, oh, well, it's so buried, you can't find that anywhere. It's like, it's all just, it's like, well, yeah, you can, if you dig and you look and, you compare and you're able to be diligent in your research. And I felt that needed to happen. And then how to work with them on a spiritual context too, because that's still happening.
I especially love how you always have a great color photos. It's stuck somewhere in your book. I love that you're able to show a visualization of it and break it down, because a lot of times when we see these glyphs, they're so compact and so complex that it's really hard to really grasp what they're trying to convey there. So it's really nice to have like a visual and a written comparison of what we're looking at. It really brings a lot of depth to the information.
Yeah, that's thanks to LACMA, that donated, that actually, gave us the permission to publish them. So Thank you, LACMA.
Shout out to them. So now I want to tell you about my experience reading your book, because this is the first time, like, I have really had paranormal experiences while reading a book. I was reading it outside. I tend to, for whatever reason, read your books outside. I don't know why. That's just usually how it is. And the entire time I was hearing birds, and I couldn't see them. Like, they were an invisible sight. All sorts of birds. I even recorded some of them, and they were very loud. And I felt like, okay, this is making sense. Then I started to notice that there was these hawks that kept coming back, and they kept swooping down really low, like right above my head, trying to get my attention. And this happened more than once. So, and then all sorts of bees started showing up. I had a bee in my house in the middle of the night that woke me up at about 3 a.m. And it just, so many of these occurrences. Oh, and I also saw a butterfly in my house. It was one thing after another. And I was taking your book like, okay, you said butterfly. Look what butterfly means. So I felt like reading this book, I grew internally as well. So I want to thank you for that. But yeah, it was really kind of bizarre.
You're welcome. And it's, because it's one of those things that animals are very intuitive. Animals, and not just domestic animals, wild animals too. They're very intuitive. They can sense. I mean, they can sense energy. You know, like even insects, like an ant, if you like put your hand, it doesn't necessarily see, but like before you even put your hand down, it already starts moving another way.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's when we start, when we set an intention that we're going to be connecting with animals, that we're open to connecting with animals, animals will start coming over and courting us. And we'd be like, oh, you seem fun. I want to work with you.
That's exactly what it felt like with the hawks. Oh, and I forgot to mention hummingbirds. I started seeing hummingbirds around my house. I've never seen hummingbirds as long as I've lived here, and I've been here about 6 years. So, and then my husband started seeing them too. So I didn't tell him it was from your book, but I knew.
Send them over your way.
Yeah. So I want to ask you more about shapeshifting. If you could touch a little bit on the different types of shapeshifting, because that part I found very interesting.
So, you know, and this is something that I keep in mind too, the way it was explained to me as well, and the way I know, and I've seen it too, that there's probably a lot more going on in a lot of the artwork and a lot of the practices, because we're talking about hundreds of different practices, right? Of different kinds of healers, shamanic, you know, divination. So, and most practitioners were skilled in more than one art.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was very common, very, very common. So, but generally what we have found, and this is something that we know this too, like it's been accepted because a lot of the photography we've seen, like with gaslighting, with different kinds of Curlian photography, the auras around us, you know, the subtle bodies around us. So one of them being etheric shapeshifting. And that's the most common, where a lot of us, we go in and we go into a deep meditation. I talk about this and I have different journeys in the book of how to go in. And the etheric shapeshifting, it's basically when you allow yourself to start becoming that animal. You know, you start seeing, you start changing your limbs, you start changing, you know, if there's fur, if there's scales, and you start experiencing that meditation, that journey as that animal, you know? And then when you start building your, what was called soul animating energies, because all those things, you know, it's something that, and we all know it, meditation takes energy. That's why a lot of people, they have a hard time and they fall asleep.
Yes.
They're just
absolutely.
Like, you know, and I get it, you know? Yeah.
Which is why I like the method that you teach. For anybody who doesn't know, Erika does fantastic classes. A lot of her stuff is online now, so everybody can check it out. I've taken a bunch of her classes. The method that you use for journeying, I absolutely love it. Like, it's so dynamic and expressive and visual. And I noticed that after a class, like energetically, I'm wiped out. I can't even talk to somebody or form a thought. I'm so wiped out. But it's like you feel through the different breath work that you teach, like the up and the down and the pulling of the energy and expanding. And it's very like physical and visceral, as well as light and energetic. So it's I really like what you got going.
So one of the things too is that when we start developing and start doing it on a conscious level, it's the soul animating energies. There's one being, which I talk about in my second book, Curanderismo Soul Retrieval, which is known as tonali. That's a lot of times when we have a soul loss, when shaman or curanderics say, oh, you have a soul loss. That's identified, that's associated with tonali, because that's the soul animating energy that can leave us when we have a trauma. Mm-hmm. Whatever kind of trauma it might be something, something very specific, might be something continuous. So that tonali, it's like that regulates and balances all of our body, right? So when we have more of our soul pieces together, we have more energy. There's also another soul animating energy known as a teyolia that was associated with the heart, and all things had heart energy, right? So when it's like, those are like, and I have like different ways of building that energy. One of them is very much working with the Sacred Heart and self-love practices and various things. So when you start developing that teyolia energy, and that's why I always journey into the Sacred Heart with this, is you build that energy. And then the hyodal, that's very much our power of will. That's where around our solar plexus is at. That's when we can will something into being, when we can will our body into that. And when we build our hyodal, then we can get into more of the astral shape shifting, where we can actually go into places and we can actually retrieve items. We can go in and we can, clear things on a quantum level. We can clear things on a past life, present life, and we can do a lot more work as an animal in the astral realms. Because the astral realms, you're talking about the fourth dimension, right? So it's like building your energy. And a big way of like developing your hyodal is by like, for example, shamanic dancing. That's a really big one, is like moving that energy, shaking that energy. And it's like building it, right? At the same time as you're moving it, you're shaking it. And another big one is like primal releasing. There's one primal releasing breath work where, you inhale and you shake and you shoulders back, chest down, it's ha! And then exhale, you relax your shoulders,
I have a funny story about that. A lot of times I have headphones in when I'm doing your classes. And there was like in the beginning, one of the first classes I took from you, one of the parts of it was the primal releasing. And I came in, like I was in the room, my husband opens the door, puts his head in and goes, "What's going on?" And I said, "Don't worry about it." So now when he hears it, he's like, "Oh, she's meditating." But he could feel the energy release, afterwards, because it called him from across the house. So I must have been really releasing.
Yeah, I had one of my clients, he actually works with students, and they're like, I think these were they're in their junior year of high school. So they were a little bit restless with everything going on with the online classes and everything. So that's what we had to do one time was the primal breathwork. And afterwards, everyone was like, "Wow, that was really cool."
Yeah, it is. You feel better. So now he knows. He's like, "Oh, okay, I know what's going on."
So, it's building that will. And that's the big one. That's the big one. We can build that sense of will. That's usually why I do a lot of the primal releasing breathwork exercises towards the latter part of my classes, so people can drive home or people can like function after a class.
Definitely, because your classes get intense.
Yeah. So basically that's it. It's like moving that energy, and the more animating energy you have, the different types. You can do joining, which is like going into the body of an animal, physical, and then the bilocation, where you can be in your physical body and be in the form of an animal in another place. And that you need a lot of hyodal for.
It's funny because every time I read your books, I always try your journeys in there because I'm like, I know they're going to be good. They're in here for a reason. So I tried the joining with the hawk that was flying over my head, kept coming back to my house all the time. And it was weird because I was aware that I was sitting in my chair, but I was also aware that I was flying with him and through him. I could feel the wings, like my astral part of my body stretch out as wings. And then I started seeing like a double vision where I could see looking down from high above and seeing my seeing my neighborhood, seeing my house, seeing my body. But I also knew I was here too. It was very interesting. I've never done any kind of shape shifting like that before. I had only ever astral shape shift. So I was like, this is cool. I'm doing it again.
Wow. That might be a animal coessence.
I have a feeling. And that's another question I want to get into with you. With the animal coessences, how do you know that between an animal coessence and an animal that just favors you or wants to work with you, or a spirit that is just in a guise of an animal, like how do you typically discern?
They usually come out in very specific points in your life. Usually they come out in, we call it in the Western as a dark night of the souls, like some kind of transitional. It doesn't necessarily have to be a difficult time in our lives, but something that there's a transition. They make themselves known when we're coming into being. That's another way of looking at it too.
Oh, that makes so much sense. The start of the pandemic was when the hawk first appeared, and I have seen him every single day since we went into lockdown. And it's just gotten more and more intense. I have gone and driven to different states, and these birds follow me. So, like, just piecing it all together, it paints such a big picture. I also wanted to ask you talked a little bit about a person's day sign and the connection with their coessence animal. Would you mind speaking a bit on that? Because that was very interesting.
So the day sign is like, it's basically a divinatory sign. And there's a few indigenous communities, a couple in Oaxaca, there's some Quiche in Guatemala that still practice. I'm actually going to be making day sign cards too.
Yay!
Yeah, because like, I can't find them anywhere. I'm like, I need these cards.
I know what you mean. I've looked for them as well. They don't have anything related to day sign cards, which is fine because I would rather them be done by someone who knows the culture and the history and does it properly.
So what was done was, at the time that you were born, there was a midwife that basically did a divination. And one of the things was, she identified your name. And a lot of times it was a name that was associated with an ancestor, indicating that you were getting the soul animating of an ancestor, essence energy of an ancestor, as well as possibly an animal as well too. And sometimes there were some people that had like more that continued to develop more soul animating energy by having the name of the animal. It would be like something with the name of a squirrel. Like
okay.
Naranjo. It would be like, so it's like because what it was is, it was a link. You shared a soul animating energy with that animal. So at the same time, though, something happened with like an animal that was connected with you. Something had happened to you too.
Yes, I have heard interesting stories through my family about that connection. I had a very old family member tell me about one of her neighbors in the Dominican Republic. This woman, I think she may have actually been a distant family member, but she was shapeshift into a cat, and she would go and be a busybody and walk around and spy on people. And unfortunately, one night she got the cat, as she shapeshifted into her cat form, was hit by a vehicle and injured. And the woman overnight got some sort of illness. And it took, like, she recovered, but it took a really long time because I guess the way the injury occurred when she wasn't fully there, something must have happened. Again, this happened in like the 1930s. So I don't know all the details, but when I was reading your book, I kept having these like memories come up from like stories I've heard around. So, it's interesting that you spoke about that connection in your book.
Well, the connections that I mainly talk about in the book are the ones where you actually do engage in shapeshifting into that animal, because that person becomes that animal. Either it's a physical shapeshifting completely, of that animal, or it's a bilocation where you are. I mean, you are that animal. There's one that I talk about too, that where the he's walking with his friends, and it's like they're beating me, they're killing me, and his friends are like, who's killing you? And
yeah.
James like, I'm being killed at this ranch. So he dies. And then the friends go over to that ranch, and the ranch owner basically is like, yeah, I didn't kill anyone. I killed this fox. And the way that the fox died was the same way that the gentleman died. And also with the stories with the cane that became caiman too. That one of them had a burn on her back, and they also scorched the back of the caiman as well. So, and then one was like, there was a gunshot wound through the caiman's mouth that also happened with the lady too, when she was sewing. You just fell. And so, I mean, just, yeah, it's
interesting.
And it's interesting because these are coming from documentations from the missionaries. And then it was more of them. There was like, they were talking about it, and they were just like, okay, one of them was Serna, and another one was Alarcón. They were both, and there were a few others that were also talking about it as well. And I mean, they're just like, okay, there's something going on, because we've had a lot of people come and tell us these things.
Yeah, it's to a point where you've really got to think like there's something going on here. There's too many people who don't believe that are witnessing this. But anyway, Erika, it was wonderful talking to you again. And really, for your next book, you better come back on here and talk to us, because it's been such a pleasure. For anybody who would like to reach out to you, how do they get a hold of you?
So they can go to realizeyourbliss.com, and then I have a contact section there. They can contact me, and they can just peruse. I have an about me page with like various about me, like if they want to watch videos. There's online limpias. I have a lot of resources there on the website.
Absolutely. And can you give us a quick rundown of your Instagram and your social media handles so we can all follow you and keep in touch with you?
So for IG, it's Erika.Buenaflor-Curandera. That's Curandera. And then TikTok, it's Erika Buenaflor, and that's with a K, Erika Buenaflor. And then it's .Curandera. And then
I've been loving your TikToks, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Seeing you making herbal remedies in your kitchen is really fun.
Yeah, thank you.
So for all of you back at home, I'm your host, Athena Silver. I'm a professional psychic medium, an intuitive healer, and a witch. My website is readingswithathenasilver.com. If anybody would like to have a private reading with me, I specialize in tarot and mediumship readings. All of my information is on the website. My Instagram is at athena.silver. My TikTok is at athena_silver. And my Facebook is Readings with Athena Silver. We hope you enjoyed this awesome interview with one of our favorite authors here at Rebel Crow, Erika Buenaflor, and we cannot wait to read your next book, and the book after that, and the book after that. So we hope you guys had a great time, and we'll catch you back, not next week, but the week after that. Have a great one, everyone. Bye.